A horse struggling to give birth runs into the forest and stumbles on a pack of wolves. In front of the terrified eyes of her owner, the wolves pull the foal out of her mouth with their teeth. What happens next leaves him in tears. Nick was searching for his horse. He had looked in every corner of his property, but now he was starting to think that the mare might have entered the woods. His land and the national forest bordered, but he had never bothered to put up a wall next to the small fence that separated them. Now he was going to have to search a massive area. He had a few animals, but Star was Nick's baby. He was very protective over her, and today he was even more worried than usual. After all, she had been in labor the last time he saw her. He was searching all the spots he knew she liked, but she was nowhere to be found. He was sick with worry and on his way to the river when he saw them. Star, the horse, was in the forest, but she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by a pack of wolves. Nick was scared and freaking out. He was too far away to stop anything from happening to his horse, but maybe if he screamed loud enough, the pack would scatter. Nick started yelling and flailing his arms, and he immediately attracted the attention of the wolves. When they turned to face him, he felt his blood freeze in his veins. One of the wolves had a scar on his nose, and seeing it instantly catapulted Nick into the past. It was another day in the forest, and he was riding Star. They were taking a day for themselves just to have fun together. The freedom of running along the forest was incredible, and Nick was out of breath with awe. But suddenly, Star stopped and listened. Nick wanted to head back to his cabin, but she refused to move. He tried to take her in another direction, but she wouldn't go. She decided to make her own path, and Nick held his head down while she ventured deeper into the forest. She would stop every few seconds and listen, then continue on her way. She brought him to a side of the hill and stopped in front of an opening in the rocks. It looked like a wolf mom and her puppies were using it as a den, but something horrible had happened here. It looked like the mother wolf had been in some sort of fight. She had lost a lot of blood and was beyond help. Her cubs were very young, but they seemed healthy. It looked like Star had realized that there was someone that needed them. The wolf cubs ran around her, and instead of being nervous, she nuzzled softly and let them sniff her legs. Nick wasn't sure what to do with them, but he knew they had to help them. He took one last look at the mother to make sure she was beyond saving, and with a final sigh, he started grabbing the cubs. Since Star had no issues with them, he placed them in the saddlebags and closed them in. Then they took them home. Nick fed them and kept looking after them, but they remained completely devoted to the horse. Nick made sure that they spent plenty of time outside. When they were still very young, he let them play in a small fenced-in area that he used to medically check animals. It was large enough for them to freely roam in, but small enough for them to stay safe. One day, they were in there playing while the horse was hanging out in the pasture. Suddenly, the cubs started howling and making a lot of noise. Their calls got Star's attention, and she immediately raced over to them. The pasture gate opened easily when she leaned against it, and then she ran over to the enclosure where the wolf pups were. Nick came out from feeding his goats and heard the commotion just in time to see Star running past. She tried pushing the gate open, but that one wouldn't budge. That was when she stood on her hind legs and stepped against the gate. It flew open at the impact, pieces of wire flying everywhere. She rushed in, and shortly behind her, Nick went inside too. The cubs were barking at something, and he pushed past the mare to see what it was. In the quick glimpse he caught, Nick could see that it was a snake, and not just any snake, but one of the most dangerous reptiles they had in the area. If it bit one of the cubs, they would have no chance of survival. Normally, wolf pups would learn from their mother that they need to steer clear of these types of creatures, but since she wasn't around to teach them, they were acting out of curiosity alone. But this game could cost one or more of them their life. Both Nick and Star were attached to the wolf pups and would be devastated if they lost any of them. The horse acted much faster than Nick could. She stomped on the snake and kicked what was left away. If it had been up to him, Nick would have taken it away to be released, but Star's protective instinct had kicked in, prompting her to do whatever it took to save the cubs from danger. Nick breathed a sigh of relief, but immediately after that, He got the second fright of the day when one of the puppies looked at him, revealing a gash across the bridge of his nose. Had the snake managed to get to him? Nick grabbed him by the scruff of his neck and rushed to where he had his first aid kit. The horse and the rest of the pups ran along with him, confused about what was going on. He was normally the wildest of the wolves, but now he just lay in Nick's arms. His calm demeanor scared Nick more than anything. Was the venom already circling through his body? He tried not to panic. He held him under the light and cleaned the wound. Then he saw something surprising. There weren't the two telltale marks of snake fangs after a bite. Nick was seriously starting to doubt that the snake had played any part in the wound on the little wolf's face. And when he pulled out a piece of the wire fence from the wound, his suspicions were confirmed. The wolf had not been bitten. Instead, one of the flying pieces of wire had nicked his face. Thankfully, it got him on the nose and not a bit higher up in one of his eyes. Nick cleaned the wound and kept treating it for a few days. It didn't get an infection from the dirty wire, but it did leave the puppy with a scar on his nose where the hair never grew back. The wolf pups became part of the family with Star as their equine mother, but Nick wanted them to go back to the wild eventually. And when they got a bit older, he tried to coax them into moving into the forest. But his efforts were in vain. So instead, he set them up to live in an outside enclosure that he would leave open for them to come and go as they pleased. As much as they loved their new room, they could just as often be found cuddled up next to Star in the stables. However, by the next summer, they were almost fully grown and were starting to show signs of restlessness. They would go out for longer periods, and the time they spent at Nick's place became shorter by the day. And then one day, they just didn't come back. They had gone to the wild where they belonged. Star had been sad about their departure, but only a few years later, she had found out she was expecting her very own baby. Her wolf family had left her, but she was about to build another one. Nick watched her closely during her pregnancy and had an equine vet come out to the cabin every 2 weeks to check on her. Everything went smoothly for months, but when labor started, he wasn't happy with the way she was progressing. She was very restless and seemed to be struggling. The labor was taking too long, and Nick wanted the vet to come out and check on her. But when he came back after the call, he found the gate open and the horse gone. At that moment, he completely forgot about the vet and rushed out to search for her. When he found her surrounded by wolves, he felt terrified. But the moment Nick looked into the wolf's face and realized he had a scar on his nose, relief washed over him. These were the babies he had raised with Star. He was sure that they could never hurt their adoptive mother. But just as soon as that thought popped up, doubt crept in too. They had been wild for a few years now. Could they have forgotten the horse? Could they be jealous of her baby? He now recognized the 3 cubs they raised, but there were more wolves added to the family. These were completely wild wolves that might injure them. But Star didn't have any more time to consider whether she should keep pushing or not. The baby was coming. Nick could see the head, but when some of them pulled the foal out of Star with their sharp fangs, he felt certain that they were about to slaughter it. Star gave an exhausted neigh, and she crouched down on the ground next to the pack. She was too tired to fight the wolves, and Nick felt his heart break for what was about to happen. But it turned out that he didn't have to worry. As soon as the foal was free, the wolves put him down and started licking him like he was their puppy. It was their adopted brother, after all. They gently cleaned him and started to nudge him to get up. It was incredible to see that the bond they had with the mama horse had so quickly transferred to her new baby. As Nick watched on with tears in his eyes, they also checked on Star. She seemed calm now, even if she was tired. Her wolf baby surrounded her, and since she was lying down, they cuddled in close. They even licked her to give her comfort. It was a beautiful sight, but Nick had to interrupt this sweet moment to examine the mom and her baby. The rest of their new wolf pack kept their distance, but the wolves raised by them jumped around Nick to greet him. He stuck his hand out to scratch their heads as he was used to, but then pulled it back. They might not be used to that or comfortable with it anymore. But the wolf with the scar came closer and bent his head, putting it in Nick's hand. They had missed getting scratches. It felt like a family reunion. Star and her baby were doing well, but as it was getting late and darker, she seemed to understand that they had to go home. She got up, and Nick picked up the new baby to carry him home. The little foal was not strong enough on his feet to walk all the way back home. Nick thought that they would have to say goodbye to the wolves at that point, but to his surprise, they ran along with them. They even checked to see him placing Star and her baby in her stable to rest. He was slightly worried about his other animals with the wild wolves there, but it seemed his original pack had warned them that those were friends and not dinner. He never lost any of the goats or other animals to the wolves, but what was even more shocking was the fact that the wolves had seemingly decided that they wanted to spend more time at home. His pack went to the enclosure they had used for their den, and they laid down in front of it. He hadn't changed anything inside, and it still held their bedding and water bowl. He opened the door, and the entire pack went inside. They hung around for a few days, watching as the foal got bigger, and then they were gone. Without the pack's intervention, both Star and her baby could have been lost. It was sad to see them go, but Nick was glad they showed up when they needed them. And to his surprise, that wasn't the last time he saw them. From then on, the wolves came home to their den many times to rest and take advantage of Nick's care and company. They had the best of both worlds, and Nick was happy to provide his part. What a beautiful story! Did you think the wolves would hurt the foal? Do you think wild animals always remember the people who helped them in the past? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and join us again for even more stories that will inspire you.